All right. Greetings. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected except for when things go off the rails. Anyways, yeah, I just had to kind of redo the whole thing. I really wanted to bring you this Walter Jane presentation, and 2 days in a row of it just going completely haywire was a little too much for me to take. But we are back on Rockfin. We are live on Rockfin. If you would like to watch me on Rockfin, ROKFIN.com. Love to see your chats on Rockfin. But welcome, guys. Welcome back. I'm sure many of the folks will come on back. I just didn't want to have 2 days in a row of just massive technical issues through the whole first 20 minutes of a live stream. That just sounds like no fun to me. Rich Diana says it's not easy to follow Doom, and Richard Monroe says computers make life easier. Yes, they make life easier, except when they make them harder. Some days they make them harder. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come back and bring this Walter Jane presentation to you when I have all the aspects of how it is I'm supposed to present this all worked out. But for whatever reason, it was just not meant to be. But I wanted to quickly just say the upshot of the idea was that you regenerate agriculture, use regenerative agriculture. I don't know if you want to call it permaculture or not. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same concept. I don't know that it is. And I'm not presenting it as the solution. I'm just presenting it as a solution, one of many that might be in the arsenal if we were to somehow make it out of the morass of human existence as it is now, which is that humans just can't seem to get their minds together around getting it together. Andy the Gardener says computers make planet eating easier and much faster. But yeah, I just think that I think if we're gonna do something, take right action. If we're gonna do something that's going to help the planet and not hurt it, in our mission, Jesus Christ. If we're gonna do something to help the planet and not hurt it, in our mission to I don't know, somehow stave off extinction. Then I think this could be one of the things in the arsenal. One of the least destructive things in the arsenal. Who knows? Again, it depends on humans managing a future for themselves. And really that's, if we're going to have a future, that's pretty much the only way it's going to happen. Not to mention the nuclear reactors waiting to melt down all over the planet. So if we're gonna have a future, we're gonna have to figure out how we're going to decommission all of those nuclear plants. Well, Rich Diana, this is why I wanted to present it, is that Rich Diana says you can regenerate the soil, but the coming heat doesn't care. That's the point was the point that I was trying to get to when I was showing it to you, is that using this agriculture cools the planet. It radiates heat back out into space through water vapors and the water coming off the land. It also creates clouds, which creates albedo, which reflects heat back into space. So think of like a natural mirrors project, right? So Guy McPherson has brought up this project that they're working on at Harvard called Mirrors, and the idea would be to put thousands of mirrors in the ocean or on the land somewhere and redirect the radiation back out into space, right? So that's the concept behind this. But so let me extrapolate a little more. So the concept behind this regenerative agriculture is that it's a fully contained, like it's a fully contained system. So it kind of develops a cycle, if you will, a hydrological cycle where you are growing grasses. They are sending water vapor into the air. The water vapor is creating clouds. The clouds create albedo. The albedo redirects the radiation back into space. The clouds also generate rain, which comes back to the ground, and the cycle goes forward. So was that explanatory enough? I think hopefully I did a good job explaining that. But that was basically the whole thing in a nutshell. So, right. Yeah, but I also think that I feel like there's a great amount of validity to the idea of just rewilding. Maybe, humans getting out of as many spaces as possible and letting the Earth do its thing. There is permaculture as well. The other good thing about this idea, or any of those ideas, is that all of them can be done locally. They don't have to be managed from a government source. They don't have to be a top-down kind of strategy for redirecting humans into less destructive ways of living. It's something that humans can do. You can just go out and start doing it, right? Like you can get a group of people together, and you can just go out, or you can just do it on your own. You could just go out and start doing it. So as Walter Jane stated in his presentation, it's grassroots. It's a grassroots thing that you can do. I mean, literally grassroots, but it's something that people can just start doing, and you don't need government intervention. You don't need anything really. You just need the will and the idea to go do it. Okay, so Rich Diana, let me go on and address that. So when you regenerate the agriculture, when you have grasses growing, or whatever, it's not just grasses, but when you have this agriculture going and you have living things growing, it's sequestering carbon. And you have microbes in the ground, you have fungi, you have all kinds of stuff going underground. There's like 30% of the mass of vegetation is underground, 30% is above the ground. So you have lots of things going underground that are also, the soils themselves are trapping the carbon. So this is basically carbon capture, creating albedo, and regenerating hydrological cycles and cooling. So it's capturing carbon, cooling, and also creating albedo all at the same time. Is that a helpful explanation? Basil Peterson says, let's do it. Well, Basil Peterson is already doing it, right? Basil? So what this is like a natural way to do a lot of the things that they're talking about generating technology to do, right? Carbon capture, putting mirrors in the ocean to redirect sunlight back into space. Ways in which we could possibly keep the temperature down. So all of those, Rich Diana, will it scale? Well, what is the entire planet made of? Or what's covering the most of the planet? Until now. Well, another thing that Walter Jane said in his presentation was that we've only got half of the natural habitat that we had 8,000 years ago or whatever it was. So we've destroyed basically half of the natural world or the wild if you will. So the purpose of this is to regenerate deserted areas, or regenerate, degraded areas, regenerate deforested areas. So you start doing this, and you immediately start the cycle of life, if you will, that will support all of these processes, right? So I don't know. I'm not saying that it's not a magic bullet. It's not the thing. It's not the only thing. It's not the answer. Irk1 says it would scale very quickly if people did it. Exactly. Well, if you do it, then you're doing it, right? So that's right. Cure hikes. The problem is that we are destroying more by the day, and that is the problem. So, Rich Diana, to answer your question, it will scale. And the really awesome thing about it scales kind of like from a local level on out. So it's not, again, it's not something that has to be managed from a totalitarian, top down kind of, in a top down kind of way. It doesn't have to be like a government program. It's something that people can just start doing, right, in their own regions, in their own localities. I don't know. It's a pretty awesome idea. I wish I could play you the clip. And when I figure out everything that's going on, I will bring it back and I will play you the whole clip, and we can watch it, and hopefully he can explain it better than I'm explaining it. But Basil Peterson says, I'm doing it, but I did it because it feels better. And there you go. Right. So maybe don't do it with a goal in mind, but maybe do it with the goal that you're just doing the right thing. But the thing is that not only are you doing the right thing, it makes you feel better, but it actually is the right thing. Imagine Basil Peterson if so many more people were doing what you're doing. And that's why I was trying to present this to you, is because this is a positive thing to do that is not destructive to the planet. It's actually just working in tandem with nature. And so if you start doing this now, if for some reason we get a negative feedback and the planet gives us a couple more years to work with, as far as having a future, right? Then if people are already doing this, then we're already kind of fixing the problem, if you will. So, and maybe if we need a couple more years to get people's minds right, Kuro, right, around the fact that how we're living is not how we should be living. If people are already doing this, if we're already generating a hydrological cycle, if we're already creating albedo, if we're already sequestering carbon, on a small scale, when people get their shit together, we can scale it, right? So much more fast, so much more quickly. Right. And so let me go back here. Robert Arajo says the Mirrors Project will never get off the ground. No money to be made. And whether there's money to be made or not on the Mirrors Project, again, this is something that takes much less of an investment. You can just start doing this with very little input. Creative Experiment says, sounds simple to me. Free rent and free food while installing Australian slim water tanks with vertical gardens attached. Well, and on top of all of this is that you are, it does involve agriculture, so you are creating food for the, people that need food. So, I don't know, just putting it out there. I'm not saying it's a fix. Again, one more time. I think rewilding is also, an extremely important thing to consider. So Salt Laker says the American way is to destroy everything. I think we call it manifest destiny. Indeed. Rich Diana, to change, we must replace capitalism. Indeed. Yeah, so all of this is to say that, even if we do all the right things, there is a lot to overcome. There is a mountain of destruction to overcome. Annie the Gardener says humans have not done anything and will not do anything to alter their guaranteed fast track to extinction, which is what I was kind of trying to get to, is that we need more than. These are all great. There are plenty of great ideas out there. There's lots of solutions. The problem is that humans don't take the solutions up and go like, let's run with these solutions, right? The problem is that humans continue to do the wrong thing. Irk1 says cleaning up the governments and companies' messes is like cleaning up after a family of slobs. It just has to be done, and it keeps a home functioning. And there you go. And so let's get into the other thing I wanted to talk about today. There seemed to be a lot. There was a lot of discussion in the last 24 hours on social media about doomers and anti-doomers and what are we going to do and what's the path forward, and doomers suck and anti-doomers suck and all these, there's a lot of discussion about whether anything can be done or whether we should do anything, or whether, whose fault it is that we can't get an answer and go forward. So I wanted to read a couple of things. Funky Mystic says, local food resilience means not relying on the fossil fuel supply chain. There you go. And there you go, right? So when you create food locally and you're doing these things locally, you are unhitching your wagon from the fossil fuel capitalist system. Robert Arajo says, people I know want no part of living a simple life. Sudico says, I'm often too depressed to even care about what I do, let alone care about the environment. So that's probably part of the problem. All right, so there was just a lot of discussion and maybe debate and maybe thoughts around doomerism or deep adaptation, or how do we go forward and what are we doing and how do we do it and who's wrong and who's right. I want to just say quickly before I read this, I have my moments of judgment. I have been judgmental in the past, and I will have my moments of judgment in the future. And there are things that I think are better ideas than others. There are things that I think should be taken up and carried forward, and other things that I think should be left in the dustbin of history. So yeah, what is life? If a big part of life is judgment, discernment. Part of being a human is discerning what's good and what's bad for you, what's right and what's wrong. So I mean, there's no way to live and be completely free of judgment, unless you're just sitting meditating in a field somewhere, unless you're completely if you're taking yourself out of every social situation. So I like the idea of no judgment, and I'm trying to be less judgmental myself, but there, there's some things you got to make decisions on. So you got to put on your judge hat and go like no or yes, right? So anyways, I think acceptance is probably a better word about what it is that we're going to have to do in order to go forward. There's going to be a lot of ideas about what it is we're going to be able to do or need to do or be allowed to do, or things that are bad ideas and things that are good ideas. There's going to be a lot of thoughts and ideas about this. But let me just say one thing. To the doomers of the world, or the people that think that we should not do anything, or we should just go ahead and die really soon, or, the planet's going to be better without humans, et cetera, et cetera. Let me just say, regardless of what I think about all of that, you are not going to stop humans from trying to figure out a solution. You are just not going to. If you think that humans are not going to try to do everything in their power to save the planet or save themselves from extinction, you are, I don't know. I don't know what planet you've been living on or what humans you've been living around, but like that is never going to happen. So eventually, as this problem makes itself more apparent, as this problem evolves and escalates and draws everybody into the realm of understanding that we have a problem, humans are going to do everything in their power to try and fix this, okay? That's going to happen. That's just going to happen. I'm sorry. That's as guaranteed as, extinction itself. That people will try and find a solution to this. So my suggestion to you, doomers, my friendly doomers, my suggestion to you is to try and steer the conversation into better solutions and not stupid solutions, right? Try and steer the conversation into better ideas against bad ideas. So there are some bad ideas about what it is we can do in the face of climate change, right? Like carbon sequestration is stupid. SRM is stupid. There's lots of stupid ideas out there. There are really good ideas like regenerative agriculture or permaculture or rewilding or, right? Those are good ideas. What you want to do is try and steer humans into the good ideas, okay? Like if you tell people it's all over and just stop trying and just give up because we're not going to do it anyways, and that's fine if you want to take that tack. I'm just telling you, you're not going to stop humans from trying to find a solution. So if we're going to find a solution, if humans are going to go down that road, and we are, you should get up into the conversation and try and steer it into a better way instead of just coming in and going, no, no, like, I'm sorry. It's all not only not helpful and not productive, but it's just a non-starter, and it's a non, I don't know how to put it. It's just nothing. If you're just coming in and going, no, like you're not really helping shit. So, I mean, that's cool. If we're all gonna like, sit here and commiserate about the end of the world or the end of the human race or extinction and we're all going down, that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. Acceptance is also a part of the equation. But I'm just saying, people are going to try and find a solution. And, you with your big brains and your good ideas, you might want to get into the conversation of like, what's the better path? That's all I'm just suggesting. And that's kind of the point of this channel. One of the points of this channel, one of the reasons for this channel is to steer the conversation in a better direction, hopefully. Right? So yes, I have a doomeristic outlook. Yes, I don't, there are a lot of things that make me feel like our chances aren't good. But I also have a part of me which is like, well, if a solution is going to present itself, or if we're going to have a little bit of a window somehow because of negative feedbacks, or maybe global dimming isn't as bad as we thought, or blah, 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 blah. For whatever reason, if humans are going to go on this escapade anyways, like I would rather suggest better things, or at least be in the conversation of the solution, rather than just take myself out of the conversation totally. So I'm straddling both fences. Maybe that's a bad idea, but that's just who I am. That's how I am. So I'm trying to see both sides, and I feel like at the end of the day, nobody knows what the hell is going to happen, right? So okay, Mirabel Kane. I don't know what you're doing here, but nobody cares. Nobody cares, Mirabel Kane. All right. Nobody cares about your crypto trades or whatever it is you're talking about. Rich Shanna says, steer the conversation hopium fully. You're right. Renee Michelle, we do not have to invent anything. Indigenous people around the world know what to do already. And there you go. And there you go. So yeah, there's a lot of conversation around doomerism, non-doomerism, and let's just talk about it. Let me read a few things for you, and we'll kind of just write out this video with this. So interesting post on Twitter yesterday. Hold on. Hopefully y'all can see this. Oh no, you can't see this. Damn it! I knew. Here we go. Let me get you both. Let me get you all on here. Yep. Okay. All right. Costa Samaris posts this. Climate change is way more serious than people realize, and we need to act immediately. But the deep adaptation doomer grifters are not your friends, says Costa. This is correct. We could lose everything, but there's no reason not to try and make what can work. Okay, so he's got a point. I'm not saying this is necessarily my outlook, but this is the way a lot of people are going to think about this. And so, I think you really got to be accepting of the fact that people are going to have different ideas around what it is we do in the face of climate change. And some people are just going to be doomers about it, and that's okay too. But let's look at the link that he tweeted, which is the darkest timeline from the New York Times, which could or could not be interesting / funny. Deep adaptation, quote unquote, made people confront the end of the world from climate change. Does it matter if it's not correct? But I like the statement that it's not correct. Again, I love mainstream media these days. Just tells you what to think, right? They never present facts as just, here's the story. They like to put in their like, well, this is an opinion piece. And I'm sure this is an opinion piece. But even news articles are full of opinions, which make them all opinion pieces, right? So you're not necessarily reading the news when you're reading mainstream media. You're reading one big opinion piece, one big op-ed. Anyways, this is by Jonah Engel Bromwich, December 26, 2020. 2 years ago, an influential paper suggested that we were too late to save the world. This paper helped rewrite the direction of British universities, played a major role in reshaping the missions of climate organizations and religious institutions, had a significant impact on British activism, and has been translated into at least 9 languages. It made its author into something of a climate change messiah. The report's prediction of an imminent and unavoidable societal collapse from climate change had a striking and immediate effect on many of its readers. Andrew Medhurst, a longtime banker, cited it as one of 4 factors that made him leave his job in finance to become a radical climate activist. Oh, that's interesting. Joy Carter, the head of a British university, moved immediately to incorporate it into her curriculum. Alison Green, then an academic, printed it out and passed it out at executive meetings at her university. Galen Hall, now a researcher in the Climate and Development Lab at Brown University said that it led him to question the value of the climate activism to which he had been committed. So a couple of different reactions. Some started to be climate activists, some questioned their climate activism. Other high-profile papers like Trajectories of the Earth System in the Anthropocene, also from 2018, and Timothy Lenton's overview of tipping points, published in Nature the following year, have galvanized the climate movement. But this self-published paper, Deep Adaptation, a map for navigating the climate tragedy, had a different, more personal feel. The paper's central thought is that we must accept that nothing can reverse humanity's fate, and we must adapt accordingly. And the paper's bleak, vivid details emphasizing that the end is truly nigh and that it will be gruesome clearly resonated. When I say starvation, destruction, migration, disease, and war, I mean in your own life, wrote the author Jem Mendel. And yeah, you know, Jem, one of the many, many people who have moved closer to who they don't mention in this article, Guy McPherson's viewpoint. Again, more and more people moving towards, you know, Guy McPherson's outlook and not away. So that should tell you something there, right? People are waking up. People are having a revelation. People are becoming aware in good and not so good ways. With the power down, soon you won't have water coming out of your tap. You will depend on your neighbors for food and some warmth. You will become malnourished. You won't know whether to stay or go. You will fear being violently killed before starving to death. So that's rough, but that's a very distinct and real possibility. And I absolutely hate this next paragraph because, again, this is mainstream media, you know, brainwashing / propaganda / programming. And I just despise all of this. And I despise the word debunk, by the way. Debunk does something to my lizard brain. It makes me snap. I want to start screaming at people when they say the word debunk. Anyways, since publication, much of the way the science is summarized in the paper has been debunked by climatologists. And has it? This is the part where they just straight up start lying to people, and it really, really frustrates me. Because nothing has been debunked. Not one thing has been debunked. They're just debunked by what? Mainstream neoliberal climate, Josh Foxes of the world? Who debunked this? But the fact that they just say this in this article will, you know, just very placating to people who aren't going to look into the issue any deeper than reading this article in the New York Times. This kind of stuff. It really does make me quite angry. But even if the math doesn't add up, again, this person doesn't know jack shit about math or anything adding up or debunking. Even if the math doesn't add up, does that make the dark conclusion any less meaningful? And it just ends, the paragraph ends so strangely because it's like, well, even if this is all wrong, is it still meaningful? Well, I don't know. If it's right, it's going to be really, really fucking meaningful. Don't you think so? You douchebag. The most active Deep Adaptation forum is on Facebook. Though believers can gather on other platforms, including LinkedIn, the forums were established by Mr. Bendel 48. I had about 800 unsolicited emails in my inbox, Mr. Bendel said, recalling the time shortly after publication. I decided I'd launch a forum so all these 800 people could talk to each other. Again, you know, more and more scientists moving towards Jem Bendel and Guy McPherson and Roger Hallam, and you know, I don't know where this is a completely, to go back to this paragraph, completely unsupported and unsubstantiated paragraph of words, grouping of words together, and it's infuriating. Anyways, but when you write stuff like that, that's when you get called a douchebag. The forums were established for people who felt wide awake after reading the paper, psychologists who wanted to change their practices to help those who had been uprooted by climate change, retired bankers in New York who wanted to introduce Mr. Bendel to their networks, single mothers who couldn't stop crying when they looked at their young children. Despair was an immediate pitfall because the groups attracted people who believed that human extinction was imminent. Many talked about suicide. Forum rules on Facebook bar the discussion of suicide methods. Other rules bar discussion of climate news, asking participants to focus instead on how to adapt. It did have an uncomfortable cult kind of feel about it, said Mrs. Green, Ms. Green, let me get that right, now the executive director of Scientists Warning. She left the forum because she didn't feel qualified to counsel someone considering suicide. But despair wasn't all that bound deep adaptation's more dedicated adherents. David Baum, a 60-year-old Seattle mystic, latched onto the spiritual implications. Jem has the most massive intellectual bandwidth I have ever encountered, he said. He is one of the best writers alive today, and he has coped magnificently with unexpected celebrity based on a very difficult role that he is being asked to play. Mr. Bendel, who is a professor of sustainability leadership at the University of Cumbria in England, said, "My own conclusion is that it is too late to prevent a breakdown in modern civilization in most countries within our lifetimes. It's not purely based on an assessment of climate science. It's based on my view of society, politics, economics from having worked on probably 25 countries across 5 continents, worked in the intergovernmental sector of the UN, been part of the World Economic Forum, working in senior management and in environmental groups, being on boards of investment funds," he said. "You know, I've been a jack of all trades." Right, and it's not just climate collapse that people are seeing. They're seeing a total societal lurching towards an abyss, right? Economic collapse, societal collapse, environmental collapse. Others took comfort in the certainty of Mr. Bendel's assessment. There was little of the unknown associated with usual scientific forecasting. Even those who thoroughly disagree understand that appeal. It's really difficult to look at those probability distributions and know what to do, said Kate Marvel, a climate scientist at Columbia University and the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York. "I personally just want to be told this is what will happen. This is what you should do right now." Mr. Bendel said that full apprehension of the extent of the climate crisis is naturally deeply shocking. That, he said, was why the forums needed to exist, as well as why he created the retreats he began hosting in 2019. The focus is on inner adaptation rather than policies for reducing the harm from societal collapse. Earlier this year, Emily Atkin, an environmental journalist who had not even heard of deep adaptation, let alone read it, wrote about a repeating cycle she'd observed. The phenomenon is some dude who is really smart in some other way and has expertise in something else, perhaps stumbles upon climate change, takes about 1 month to a year to think about it, and then decides that all of a sudden they have the solution that nobody else has thought about, she said. Okay. I don't really see where a solution fits into just accepting that we're going over the edge, but okay. She said, explain the pattern, and they don't consult with a diverse array of experts before releasing it. They do reporting that confirms their own biases. Okay, this is where it gets into where the weirdness comes out. But anyways, we'll keep going. And then they put out a product that uses very strong language, stronger language than the evidence that they have justifies, to paint a picture that the reason we haven't solved this is because everyone has been wrong. No one has thought of their great idea yet. Well, so, yeah, anyways. This lady wants to apply things to people that are not true because it fits her construct of what it is to, whatever, run a deep adaptation forum. Yeah. Or she's applying something else to what this is. Um, anyways, another criticism that emerged was that the central fatalism of deep adaptation was based on misunderstood science. According to these critics, if you strip away the misconceptions, there's room for the hope that Mr. Bendel has cast aside. Oh, okay. And maybe there is. Who knows? But after his self-publication, the paper attracted criticism by climate scientists. The paper was submitted to and rejected by a peer-reviewed sustainability journal. Mr. Bendel has framed the rejection almost as an advertisement of his paper's provocation and import. Dr. Marvel reviewed some of the science in the paper more recently and said that it was filled with errors and misconceptions. For instance, Mr. Bendel writes that the loss of the reflective power of the ice in the Arctic is such that even a removal of a quarter of the cumulative carbon dioxide emissions of the last 3 decades would be outweighed by the damage already done. Dr. Marvel said that this represents a basic misunderstanding. Okay. Though ice melting represented a feedback loop, she said, in which an effect of the climate becoming warmer itself contributed to further warming, there was a conflation in Mr. Bendel's thought between that feedback loop and a so-called tipping point. Okay. She says it's not an example of a tipping point. She said, this is something that is well understood. You make it warm, you get rid of ice. You make it cold, you get ice. Okay, so how are we going to make it cold, Dr. Marvel? Oh my God. Yeah, so Mr. Bendel provided a list of other scientists who supported him, and there are other scientists who support him. Right, and we already know that. He said climatology was too big a field for Dr. Marvel or Mr. Schmidt to be able to assess his claims knowledgeably and recommend against establishment figures in climatology altogether. And that's true. He's right. Jim Bendel is right. He says you shouldn't be talking to Kate Marvel or whatever. And you shouldn't. Again, yes, some people with PhDs might not know everything that they need to know. Just actually go and look at the stuff yourself. Let me see. So someone else read the stuff. Galen Hall, 23-year-old Brown University researcher. He joined the Extinction Rebellion. He had become familiar with deep adaptation. And he said, I basically noticed undercurrents of things I thought were scientifically dodgy. Okay. Let's see what he thinks is scientifically dodgy. The fundamental, let me see. The fundamental battle in climate change right now is whether or not we can understand it as a primarily political struggle rather than a scientific or natural struggle, and then win that struggle. Mr. Hall said, deep adaptation or fatalism in general is just one way of depoliticizing it because it puts everything up to inhuman forces. In July, with Colleen Schmidt, who is 24 and has a degree in environmental biology from Columbia and who's acted as their de facto editor, they published a paper. The 3 people who wrote the paper rebutting deep adaptation agreed that the climate crisis has already resulted in horrific loss and that it will continue to exact a heavy toll. But they also believe that governments around the world can still make a difference and should be held to account, instead of being lulled into inaction by despair. We've lost some things. Ms. Schmidt said we could lose everything, but there's no reason not to try and make what we can work. And there we are. We're back to the beginning, guys. And we're back to the beginning, or the end, whatever you want to call it. We're back to the end. We're back to the beginning. Climate change again, and I think a lot of people can agree with this. There is a conspiracy around climate change, and that conspiracy is not that climate change is a hoax. The conspiracy is that climate change is much, much worse than the powers that be are letting on. And I think there's a natural human kind of optimism, right? So what drives a lot of humans is optimism or hope or, something to fight for, something to look forward to. And I really can't fault anybody for that. I mean, I have that too. I think we all have that on some level. Some people maybe less than others, but that's the way humans operate, right? Even though we all know that we're going to die, we do things in our lives to, promote our own lives or promote our own livelihood or promote our own, success or whatever you want to call it. We survive, we want to live, we want to go forward, even though we know at the end there's no going forward. So, I mean, that is the cycle of life. That's what life is all about. So, whether we're talking about a small cycle of one human life or one animal life or one bird life or one whale life, or we're talking about the whole cycle of species and extinction, or the planet and extinction, I think they all kind of, work the same way, right? So, we're going to be, as a collective, we're going to try and propagate ourselves further into the future, right? That's just going to happen, and so I think that there's not just an establishment kind of response to this, which is like, no, we've got everything under control, we're going to keep going forward. And I think a lot of climatologists and there are mucky mucks in the scientific world that all prop this up, prop this ideology up of like, no, we're fine, we got it under control, we're going to make, we're going to do the right thing. Things are really bad now, but if we just do the right thing, we're going to, there's going to be a lot of that, and there's going to be a lot more of that. So, but I think that to really strike at the heart of the fact that climate change is a bigger issue than they're going to let you know, and is way farther down the road than they're going to let you know, to be aware of that, to recognize that, to accept that, I think is, again, you're stepping out onto the ledge of being, discredited or discreditable or weird or out there or culty or doomer or bad or strange or, yeah, but that's where you're going to end up. Anyways, and honestly, I don't know what, I don't have all the answers. Don't profess to have the answers. I have ideas about what it is I think that we should be doing in order to not kill ourselves and kill everything else on the planet. I have lots of ideas on that, and I spout them freely on this channel every single day. And I don't think it's a bad thing to entertain solutions. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it's a very positive thing. But I also think it's a bad thing to entertain denial, right? So Dr. Kate Marvel or whatever, talking about the fact that we're just going to cool the earth and we'll get more ice. Like, how is that not entertaining denial on some level? How are we going to, that was just a wild statement by her. But anyways, and we're not even if we're just addressing the science of climate change, we're not even addressing the fact that human beings are just ultimately incredibly destructive to themselves and to everything around them. And so how do we address that? There's a whole spiritual / psychological profile that we've got to account for before we even get close to a solution. So there's that. But that's why, that's kind of why we're here. That's one of the reasons for this channel. I don't know. People may see this channel as super doomy or super out there or super weird or whatever. I'm just trying to talk about the truth about climate change and other things. But, and try and just say, like, every single day, just kind of like put a marker in the ground and say, like, we are here. Here we are. Here's what the future looks like. If we continue doing the things that we're doing, because we are here. That's all I'm trying to do. And have conversations around it. So there you go. Lastly, I don't know how much time I have, but I really wanted to read a little bit of a woman that I follow, or we're friends on Facebook. She writes these like really long, really cool, kind of, I don't know what you want to call them, blog posts or essays, these just long kind of, or diatribes about climate change and about humans, and they're all really very interesting anyways. And I'm sure that she has seen. I'm pretty certain that we follow each other on Facebook because she's seen this channel. So, but anyways, this woman's name is Sarah Baker, and she's, hopefully she's not mad I'm saying her name, but that's her name. But she writes these really great things, and I just want to read a couple of paragraphs of this because it's all pretty great. She writes, "We don't have a right to ask whether we are going to succeed or not. The only question we have a right to ask is what's the right thing to do? What does this earth require of us if we want to continue to live on it?" And that is a quote from Wendell Berry. Another good question we should constantly be asking ourselves is, what in the Jesus H. Christ is wrong with us? What is so wrong with us that we cannot and do not ask ourselves on an hourly basis what the earth requires of us? The biggest, most dastardly, most conniving, most violent enemy of all time is going largely unchallenged and even unrecognized. Where's the mobilization to take down this enemy to beat all enemies? Well, mobilization can't take form because there's a huge catch, a big glitch. This enemy has boots on the ground in nearly every one of us. To destroy this enemy involves destroying ourselves or who we think we are or have been told we are. But I got news for you. You don't know who the fucking shitballs you are. True story. Way too much of our identities are tied up in the systems that the enemy has built and that we help maintain. We're being utilized and controlled in ways we aren't even aware of. In the last few weeks here in Columbus, Ohio, there have been 2 police shootings of unarmed black men. One of the murders has body cam video footage, and like all the other videos we've seen, the total disregard for life is repulsive and infuriating. Upon viewing it, anyone with half a heart will no doubt have a voice pop into their head saying something like, "How can they all be so callous? How can they show no signs of mercy or regret?" As much as these murders outrage me, what upsets me even more is that the same voice is nowhere to be found when we participate in the daily acts that also show total disregard for life. Buying Lego sets for our kids, filling up our gas tanks, mowing our lawns, eating food picked by slaves and grown in ways that deplete the soil, writing long rambling posts on Facebook, even going to the bathroom is done in a way that takes without giving back to the earth. Unlike all other animals whose feces are reincorporated into the life cycle, we go to elaborate lengths to make sure the hummus we eat never becomes humus. This is burglary, plain and simple, but sooner than later the house we are ransacking from will be empty, and only when there is nothing left to hawk will we realize it was our own house we were stealing from. I know there currently is no way around some of the destructive things we do, but at least we could feel bad about it. Show some remorse. That seems like the first step in figuring out how to stop. But much of the horrors are just so strongly normalized. It's socially acceptable to be outraged over police killing black people, as it should be, but the same can't be said for buying Christmas presents at Target or a party platter at Costco. Our capacity for upset is corralled by this culture into narrow avenues like racism, politics, NFL draft picks, and the fact that more black people aren't nominated for Oscars, all while the most pernicious of things go totally unchecked. Next time you go to the grocery store, just try standing there for a moment. Shake off your consumer trance and just look around. Really look. Look at the items pulled from every corner of the globe. Think of all the resources and labor involved to get them on the shelf. Think of the destruction, the violation. It's a wonder the earth is still functioning at all. Now look at the shoppers mindlessly piling goods, more like bads, am I right, into their carts without any visible signs of regret or guilt or joy, by the way. Now look at the employees who have to work all day long in a place where they are exposed to tons of people during a pandemic. I try to do this every time I enter a store because I don't want to lose what's left of my sanity and humanity. Because I want to strive to see things for what they are. A grocery store is a concentration camp, plantation, nuclear bomb testing site, and graveyard all in one. It's the end result of so much annihilation, so much deforestation. A one-stop chop. Anyways, guys, that's all I'm going to read of this because it goes on. She writes incredibly long pieces, which are really good, but I just don't have the time to read them. They're like small novellas. Or novellas are small, right? Aren't they? They're small novels. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that reading. And the last thing she said was so true. Like when I go into a Target or someplace like that, I see everything as just trash in a landfill. Every single thing inside that store is going to end up in a landfill. Think about it like that. Whether it's used or not, whether it gets sold or not, and a lot of that stuff doesn't even get sold, right? A lot of it just sits on the shelf until they decide they got to put, new stuff on the shelf, so they take the old stuff off and they just ship it somewhere, who knows where, sometimes to the landfill. But whether it's used or not, it's all going to the same place. It's all going into a garbage truck, into a landfill. So think about that whenever you go into a Target or a Walmart or a grocery store or wherever. Yeah, grocery stores are places of pain for me a lot of the times because you got to buy food, but the way that it's packaged, the way that it's presented to you, the way that it's shipped to you, the way that it gets to you, it's like there is so much destruction that goes on with that. Anyways. Annie the Gardener says humans are most definitely not fine. Ask the megafauna. Realize says if our economics was human nature, we wouldn't be here. We evolved as tight-knit groups that shared everything to survive. That's who we really are. 989 Big Boss, turning on the lights is an act of evil in this insane society. Her name is Sarah Baker. And hopefully, just maybe don't inundate her with friend requests. She's she's really good though, and really cool. And hopefully, she's not upset that I put her name out there. And if she is, she can just hopefully tell me, and then I'll feel like a shit. But anyways, yeah, she writes really great stuff. I wish that she would kind of put her stuff on a blog or something. But maybe she just didn't want to do that. Kiro Hike says, delete your social media. Scott Andrews, support your farmer's market. Clay Baum says, disgusting monkeys. Yeah, she's really good. I've read some of her stuff before. I'll read it again in the future. She's just like, it's good. She's, got a brilliant mind. Anyways, guys, I've run out of time. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. Thanks for joining me one more time on this live stream. And to my Rockfin people, thank you for hanging out with me. We got Kevin Shanholzer on Rockfin. Thanks for the tip, Kevin Shanholzer. You're awesome. Snake 1974 says, hey ho. Urban Hermit says hello. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with me on Rockfin and on YouTube. I'll be back tomorrow at the regular time of 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until next time, peace.